Hi, everybody. Welcome to our panel, Kid Tested, Evidence Approved, to the Future of EdTech Design. I really appreciate everybody coming, the umpteenth panel of the day for many of you. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Michael Preston. I lead the Joan, Ganz, Cooney Center. We're a research and innovation lab inside Sesame Workshop, the nonprofit that makes Sesame Street. We are a field-facing organization interested in helping to translate Sesame inspired design practices for kids for the rest of the field so that creators of new and emerging media think about kids in a really thoughtful, evidence-based, and proactive way. The work we're talking about here with this group to my left is focused on opportunities to really think about diverse and equitable participation in product design. They are all practitioners and leaders in this space. This idea that we have an obligation to kids, and we also have the opportunity to design better for them if kids are involved in the process in really meaningful ways. We'll talk a little bit today about a process called co-design, which, how many people here have heard of co-design with kids before? Okay, great. So I have half of you will leave here being ready to go preach to the masses as well. But this idea that children, there are various ways to engage children in design. You can have them test the stuff. That's the most common way. Bring them in, get their reactions to things. But it's, in our opinion, a missed opportunity. If you begin early, you center kids in design, you include them and their families and their educators in some cases, and give them an opportunity to partner with you in an effort to make things that are engaging for them, have the impact that you intend, and are more likely to serve a diverse range of kids and not just the narrow ones that you might have been conceptualizing in design. So this is the kind of work we're interested in, and my colleagues here will share more about that. So what else did I want to say before we jump in? Oh, some of the stuff we'll talk about is, so I mentioned diverse and equitable participation, but also a broader set of impacts on the stakeholders in the process. So what does it mean to be a designer in that kind of experience? What are you learning? How are you adapting how you think in your own practice as a designer and so forth? And how does that translate across the entire product team or even the company that you're a member of? And then how might we measure that? What does that impact mean? And then there's the third way I think about it is about the ecosystem impact. Is there something that we might change? We're all here at ASU+GSV because we are thinking about the opportunity for innovation, for impact, but what does it mean when we're all kind of connected in that work, and what does it look like if all of our dreams came true and there's widespread adoption of this work, what does that look like? So I'm so honored to be at the same stage here with these colleagues who come at this from different levels, from the product level to a more systems level way of thinking, and so we'll hear a lot about that today. So I'm not going to introduce them. I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves, starting with Rebecca to my left here, maybe to say your name and your role in your organization, a little bit about your background and what excites you about this topic.
Great, thank you. Yeah, my name is Rebecca Kockler. I'm the executive director of Reading Reimagined, an AERDF inclusive research and development program. And I spent most of my career working in public education, in public school systems, big public school systems, and saw a lot of products that, if they were evidence-based instructionally, there were a lot of times kids just hated them. They just didn't like them. So we were spending so much time trying to train teachers on how do you convince a kid to keep doing this over and over again, because it has some research base behind it. And so as we started a lot of this work, we thought a lot about what would it take to build really great products that kids also love and believe in. And in our work is specifically focused on struggling readers in middle school. That was our project with the Cooney Center. And by that point, you've lost so many students who just don't believe they're capable or have any interest in learning to read. They do, but they're just kind of intimidated by it. And so what does it take to get a kid excited to show up? So for us, this topic to me just has so much meaning because it's about bringing our kids in and ensuring that they have access to the things that they want to, but in a way that they really love. So I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jared Joyner, and I lead the practice or product team at CZI. It's a small team that straddles our grant-making work and also our product development work. Prior to CZI, I worked in San Francisco Unified School District's central office, also in the Boston Public Schools central office, but started my career as a classroom teacher. And so part of what brings me to the work is that when you're teaching, it's so natural to do things like co-constructing your classroom norms and have those like ongoing everyday interactions with your students. But as you get farther away into the district office and into philanthropy, it becomes much harder to bridge that divide between where you're sitting and where kids are. And so I remember before the pandemic, I had an opportunity to participate in a program that the Equity Lab was running called the Nexus Fellowship, and they were really pushing us to think about how can we, in whatever rooms we're in, open the doors to make sure that the most marginalized folks are in there participating in the work that we're doing. And I had the opportunity to put that to practice as we were building along at CZI, which is this teacher-student connection builder tool. And I was leading the content development on that and was able to bring in researchers and educators, practitioners into the content development process. And I was also had an opportunity to bring in young people. So through Character Lab's CLIP program, also Grip Tape, had them reviewing content, but also had them telling us our content was bad and then writing their own questions for our product. I think it was a stark realization that one, I'm no longer a young person. Two, no matter how many letters we have behind our names, it's no replacement for the true experiences of young people. And three, just made all of our content so much better. And so I've been just very much dedicated to this work ever since.
Brandon Cardet-Hernandez, and I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Mrs. Wordsmith. We're a company that builds literacy products for kids, really focused on phonics and vocabulary, and we do it in two ways. It's all sort of game-based learning, right? From video games to tabletop games, and then all these experiences that are just fun and joyful. How did I get here? I was a teacher, I was a principal, I've done all the district office stuff, and a political advisor to the mayor in New York City on education issues. And then on some level, I think like, not a therapy session, but like I'm also here because I grew up in a house with parents who had low levels of literacy. And it was a constant driver for me of like, I felt really lucky to sort of move into a different version, sort of break the sort of statistical patterns for kids like me. And I've been driving that work in all these different ways. And I think this work matters to me because I have hoped in everything I've done, it's been centered around kids and around kid voice. And that was really true for me as a principal. And I think to your point, all of our points, I think this is probably true for all of us, like there is this moment we get so far away from kids and then we're sort of just driving policy or building products that are sort of meaningless. And having sat in a really different place where we had to experience those products sort of coming at us and we knew they were meaningless, I feel really lucky. I feel really lucky every day, but I also feel really lucky to be in this role where I get to try to do something really different. And for me, that's like very much about centering kids, designing things that kids want to use, making sure it's evidence-based, but also making it fun. Like this should be fun. We have to stop making learning so two-dimensional and painful. And so that's what brings me here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michele Leardo with the Walton Family Foundation. I support a number of our investment portfolios, including our K-12 education R&D portfolio. And the goal of this work is to really create the infrastructure and the supports for folks to create products and tools that really drive student outcomes. I'm a former researcher, a former educator, and I'm really passionate about this topic because sort of my job all day to think about what's going to drive student outcomes. I'm really excited about all the new technology, the potential for new products to be built, only if they're going to drive student outcomes, and something we haven't mentioned yet, if teachers are going to be able to use them, if it's going to make their lives easier in the classroom. We don't want a good product that's evidence-based and has some efficacy, but it's sitting on a shelf and it's not being implemented because teachers can't use it, it's hard for them, and then it's not driving student outcomes.
Thank you very much. So now you get a sense of who's in the room and why this is the kind of conversation we were hoping to have. I think it's interesting, all of us have had some kind of interaction with a large urban school district in this country, and I think that's an interesting way to kind of see where you're making kind of a cringy face, where the rubber meets the road around adoption, right? You buy these kind of products through an approved portal process, and you're hoping that they're effective in the ways you hope, but often I think the feeling I get when I ask people about this is that they're just not really what you were hoping in terms of you said products that kids love, which is rarely a word that's used around like big deployed EdTech systems and districts, right? But I think for those of us who have experienced like creating something amazing for kids, that's something that this kind of work aspires to. On that note, I want to kind of go back to you all now in any order you like to tell me about kind of any specific insights in your own experience of design in this way that maybe gives you a sense of what's possible, like where you're on the path and you're trying to make something new. What are you learning from co-design, or what insights are you gathering?
I'll go. I think there's a few things that come up for me. One, I think specifically is we can go through sort of like a play testing process, or you can do user interviews and do all the sort of stuff that we all know how to do. And that feedback is really important. Like, you get a lot from that, and you have to do both. And at the same time, the educator in me knows that when you construct a really meaningful conversation, it can be so rich, you'll get more than the sort of original question ever could have offered you. And I think when you do that in a really smart way with young people, and we've been able to do that, we've done that with you, what we're getting is insight that we didn't even imagine, and we would have never formulated a question to sort of gather, because that is the nature of human interaction, right? Like, it happens, the best work happens in dialogue, and it happens in this moment where we give young people permission to sort of construct and think and dissect and make meaning, and that's happening with their peers. Because the sort of traditional interview format, right? It's like either a questionnaire or it's with an adult one-to-one. And this is happening in group with peers in a very different way. And for us, that led us on a lot of we were working on a product together that we ended up not doing. And that saved a lot of time and saved a lot of money. And it also helped inform every other product we were going to do, not because of just the sort of design process we went through, but like, we got a lot from like what young people wanted to do. We were working on a social emotional learning product, and like how they wanted to engage in that. And like, the original idea for us felt really good. Like, we're adults, and we're like, of course you're going to want to do this. You'll chat in this way, and you'll move through this, and this will be the feelings we're going to talk about. And we ended up getting something very different around how they wanted to be moderated, how the way that they wanted to be in community with each other, the kind of dialogue they did or didn't want to have. And we have been working on a Roblox product, which has allowed us to really think about it differently and use all of that information to inform it.
One thing I would just add on is that I think one of the things we learned a lot as well in partnership in this project was there's a lot of precision and pedagogy and expertise in how you do this well. So I think everyone says they co-design, everyone says they collaborate with kids, and if you're building a product, you're always doing something with kids because you're going to put it in front of kids and you're going to get some feedback. But if you've made a lot of decisions up front, the feedback you're getting is around the edges, right? And there's so many implicit decisions you almost don't even know you've made in a product if you've built something and then you're putting it, and you're just getting feedback, you're doing user testing. And again, that matters, you should do it, it's important. But there's real skill and expertise and research in how you do co-design. And I love precision and expertise around the research of pedagogy. And so I think for us, we also just learned about that expertise, and that there's a real research base on how you do this in a way that brings kids in, that really helps kids think creatively about a process. And from that, the richness of what you learn and get is completely different than a process where you're just doing user testing. It is a completely different set of outputs. So one example, again, we were focused on middle school struggling readers, and we were co-building an app with them. Like, what would you build if you were going to build an app for your friends to teach them how to read? And again, there was so much expertise in the decisions around those workshops, what went into kids. It's not just like, let's get in Zoom and co-design an app together and let's whiteboard. Really thoughtful pedagogical choices around what kids were doing, and from that, they were so drawn in and their creativity was pulled out. One of the insights that was so profound were choices they were making around what they wanted to be public and shared and communal in the app, and what they wanted to be private and hidden. And they weren't saying that. We didn't say, hey, tell us what you want to be public. Tell us what that might be a question an adult would ask, and they'd be like, I don't even know what that means. But when you watch them through the process of what they were doing, they were making all of these choices about, this is where we're gonna talk with our friends, and we're gonna share this, and we want this to be publicly scored, and this way. Do not publish this. I don't want anybody to know this. I don't wanna be in a chat room with my friends when I'm doing this. And those choices were so different than choices we had the instinct around making. And you can imagine a middle schooler who's a struggling reader and has a lot of feelings and thoughts about that on an app that's making a different set of choices about what's public and what's private. And them just completely disengaging and say, absolutely not, I'm not about to, go into this app in this way. So that's the kind of thing around, like, again, the precision and expertise of the process is so important if you want to get the richness out of, I think, what we can learn from kids.
Can I jump in for 1 second? It's so great to hear you talk about that. One thing that was notable for me about working with you is that we did it over Zoom, right? Because we wanted a national sample that had certain characteristics, it was harder to do that in person. Most of the work we do is in person in the room where we sit on the floor, where all the adults and the kids are at the same level. So it's just an interesting twist, I think, to that. And yet the kids still got into the same mode, the same place, even though we weren't all kind of looking at each other around a rug, which is preferable to me. But I think kids are so, like, the digital world is the world, and for kids, and that's a theme that I'm hearing in both what you and Brandon had to say a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, well, two things to add. I think one related story, as we were working on along, we have this hypothesis grounded in research about how to build relationships through the dialogue between the teacher and the student. And so as we were working through questions with young people, questions that we thought would make perfect sense to kind of build a progressively deepening relationship, just heard from the young people that it would just be awkward or strange to answer that type of question with teachers. And so it helped us really rethink like the depth of the questions, what types of questions were in there. And then I think building again off of what Rebecca shared is just this notion of, it's being really thoughtful in how you're designing the sessions. And so one thing that we did is, it's like the best ideas never come out in the first hour or so. And we kind of, with our cohorts of young people, we would start with one group, and then we would come back later, have another group who was still interested, and even come back later after that with another group, and allowing you to build the relationship, allowing you to go much deeper, and then allowing them to kind of just be more open with what they're sharing. And again, like, I can't stress not just the precision in our process, but also the nuanced responses that the young people gave, or just always blew us out of the water.
Yeah, and maybe just from the perspective of a national funder, I'm not doing the co-design. I get to support you all in it, which is amazing. Sort of two things from our perspective. One is holding the high bar for quality around what co-design is, and then amplifying the folks who are doing it well. So when we talk about co-design, what does that actually mean? Rebecca said it's not just testing your product at the end. It's not just testing it on your neighbor's kids. It's a continuum. It's iterative throughout the process, beginning, middle, and end. And again, it's not your neighbor's kids. It's all different types of kids in different contexts, and that's what we really mean by this. It's not just like the typical research indicators that we have: free and reduced lunch, ethnicity, grade. It's really about context, geography, the type of learner, neurodivergency. Like, we're talking about an array of diversity here. So sort of talking about this, saying it out loud, contextualizing it, and holding that high bar. This is what we mean by co-design, I think, is our job as a funder. And then again, creating this momentum, amplifying you all who are doing it so well, and then incentivizing the field through sort of funding infrastructure, baking it into grant programs, and having it be a contingency for funding so that it signals to the field how important this is.
Yeah, it's funny how so much of this is about building like the right culture and making kids feel centered in this experience. And I think I kept saying around the rug earlier, but this idea that we so rarely give kids the opportunity in educational experiences to tell us what they think, what they want. And I admire the ways you've all described that work for yourselves. And on that note, I'd love to ask, shifting the focus a little bit to your own organizations. Part of the joy and the benefit of the work is it's helpful for your teams to think about this work in a different way. Brandon, you mentioned like having more voice, more child voice, in front of your engineers, for example, right? So I'd be curious to know what you saw as a result for the adults who were in that process together.
I'm happy to jump in. I mean, I think this is one of the places where I think the proof is literally in the pudding here, and I think there may have been skeptics in the early days, but I think after participating in some of the experiences, I think a lot of our teams, our product teams, are really excited about it. I also think that this has helped. And again, so we're working more at the adolescent age. I know this is like the early childhood track, but most of our products are adolescent focused. And so this is also an opportunity for us to demonstrate some of these core tenets of adolescent development, which are really about exploration and discovery. And so giving our team that exposure and how receptive young people are to opportunities to explore and discover and participate and be active participants in the work. I think also, one of our other pieces that's really important to how we approach this is compensating young people for their time, but also we've been able to kind of, with some of our co-design groups, do career talks and kind of expose them to our careers. And so just like getting that familiarity and fluency with interacting with young people, I think has been a huge mindset shift for our team too.
I think, there's real purpose in our work. And I think some of us move into this work, and that's like really clear, and I could hear that from all of us here, right? Like we know why we're here. We are trying to impact. We're trying to create change, and that why serves us. And we're also working in an industry where not everyone came into that work with such precision, and maybe they didn't become gamers thinking they were going to build video games that were teaching phonics, right? And so I think there's something really magical that happens that drives a culture of why for the organization, which is really important for good business. It's really important for team, but it's also important for the mission. And I think that is a central piece. This is our user, and you're gonna get to know them in a really different way. I feel like for us, that has been a really important part of what we're up to and why it matters. There's a knowing of what sort of where we're going and who it's for. And that voice matters. We have to listen to it.
Yeah, and I think, again, we're at an EdTech conference and we are building technology products. And so if you're building a technology product, you have a product team. And they have a lot of product expertise, which is so important, and user experience expertise. That is really important. And you hope your product team is really great at it. And we think ours is. But this is a different thing, actually. And just identifying that and talking about that really clearly and saying, this is not user experience testing, which is very important and has its own methodology and is a critical part of our process as well. This is a different thing, you learn a different thing, and if we start our process from this moment, we actually build. And so bringing our academic team in on this, bringing our product team in on this, they became learners themselves of ways that you engage kids in different ways than we're used to engaging students. Our academic team are used to teaching kids and doing focus groups and watching, observing classrooms, and our product team is used to doing UX research and the things you do when you're implementing product in iterative cycles, and our engineering team is used to responding to that. But for our whole team collectively to actually have a different experience with kids, to see kids from a different angle, and to understand what it would look like to kick off most of our processes through a much more engaged user experience with kids. And again, in education technology, the user and purchaser are not the same people. And if you are a district-oriented product, you're even further when you look at the purchaser and the person you're building for in our space. And it isn't actually very common outside of a little bit of UX testing in our space to really have students centered in what we build, which I would argue is partly why lots of kids don't like lots of the things we put in front of them. And so I just think for us, we got really educated in what it meant, again, through the methods that you used and the research base behind it, about having kids really present, not only in the UX, not only in observation, but really from the beginning as we thought about what we were actually building.
Michele, did you have a comment?
I was just going to say, I've heard from all of you and knowing your work, how hard this actually is and how much you have to put on the front end. So there's just so much more time, so much more R&D, so much more investment, financial time to do this. And it's really, really hard work. But it's like what Rebecca said, the end goal is your product being usable in the classroom for kids. And then you're going to have a better product. You're going to be able to sell it and, go to market faster with it. So.
And one thing I would just say, and I don't mean to say this and not say, yes, we need money to do things. So don't take that, but
set myself up
it was,
for that.
Yeah, exactly, to the foundation. But It's faster too. I mean, honestly, I think there is this sense that like co-design is so long and who has time for it? We got to build products right now and like get them out, and kids aren't being served right now in classrooms, so we just got to run. And it's like, I think we did 3 days over Zoom, and they weren't even full days with kids. I think part of it is also learning that it's again about having the right methods, having the right strategies, caring about it, saying this matters. We will actually build a different product if we do it. And the better you get, the more you're oriented to it, you just build it into your processes. So it doesn't have to be, I don't think, as time consuming as sometimes we envision it in our minds too.
Thank you for saying that. I mean, I think, to me, it feels like this is still a nascent movement that we're all kind of beginning together. It's not that the methods are brand new, but certainly their emergence and perhaps the sense that they might be scalable or adopted more widely, and that we also have more downstream impact where we can point to things that emerge from this process. It'll be a while maybe before we know whether they have impact and whether that impact scales the way we hope it does or think it will, because as people who've been in the work for a long time, we have a good sense of whether something is actually going to be effective. When you just kind of know. So on that note, I was curious to know what kind of challenges you foresee, whether they're more near-term implementation, buy-in kinds of questions, or market questions, or measurement. Where does your head go if I say what's hard about this?
I'll say one thing that's hard is that sometimes kids do give us feedback on things that don't always fit the research and how you learn to read. And that is hard. Sometimes kids are like, I don't want to read this book. And sometimes you read things that you don't like. This is just life, we have to build tools that
happens
we
every
have to,
day.
Yeah,
every
exactly.
Day.
Everything, exactly. We all read things we don't want to read. We got to read them sometimes. And so there are just these things sometimes where you're making choices where you're like, a student is giving you feedback on the part of something they really don't like, and there's another side of a research base that says this has to be there because it is about how you learn a piece. And so I think there's this balance of kind of making sense of those things that can be challenging sometimes, and sort of really valuing the perspective of a student or a person you're co-building with, and valuing some of the research components we know around how kids learn to do certain things.
Yeah, I think in a similar vein, it's feedback. And there is a co-design in the process. And I think there is a mental model where it's like, that doesn't mean everything has to be acted on. But it's really important data, and it's a really important process to move through. And I think there is a tension, and that's about belief systems with young people and all of this, right? Where it's like, do I have to do exactly what was said? Is it actually going to be right for the product? Sometimes it is, oftentimes it is. And then sometimes it's not, or it's going to be mechanically too challenging, or it's going to bring us down a different path. And so that's part of the work, but it's a really important part of the work that I actually think, to your point as well, can save you time. Because you're having those conversations at the right moment versus trying to fix for something later based on that feedback.
And you shared that instance of stopping work on a product process and shifting gears, which is a helpful insight, full stop kind of situation. But I also see the long tail or the long arc of these things, that because there's learning that happens internal to your team and that you're picking up these signals from kids, whether you're paying attention to the individual bits of feedback or taking a more global perspective, it does have some role in the whole process.
Yeah, if you're building more than one thing at once, which many of us are, then it becomes, again, it's like the ethos of your business. It's all serving, that's all data collectively for how you're thinking, whether it's about the pedagogy or the user experience, all of that feedback is coming out in the co-design.
One challenge I think we're seeing in the field is the quote-unquote access to co-design, and a lot of developers saying yeah, but we don't have access to a school district. We don't know how to get in schools, so we can't do this. And that's why it's so important to have folks at the Cooney Center who are providing this support. So they're putting out guides on how to do this. They're working with groups of people to connect them to students. It's not just through schools. Of course, that's one way to get sort of this access to students, but it's community centers, it's libraries, it's sort of meeting communities where they're at and finding the students and finding the right types of students and being really intentional about it and sort of leveraging these resources because, you know, this is possible, and just saying like I don't have access to a school district is a challenge, but it's not, you can't just say that and then move on.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I mean, I think on the one separate point is that if there's like a mindset challenge, I would just say that you want to start small, start with like a really tiny grain size and kind of build that buy-in amongst your team. And I think, because a lot of folks who work in technology have not been trained to want to do this. And so again, you can kind of have that existence proof that it's valuable. And then again, building on this other point though, like obviously great organizations like the Cooney Center, also Character Lab's Clipsters program. I happen to get in touch with Boston Student Advisory Council. We're working on a partnership with a local Boys and Girls Club. And it's just like, there are organizations that have access to young people that are probably more than likely could make use of an experience to partner with your organization if it's something that you're thinking about.
Yeah, we're not the only group doing this. I just should say, you've all said such kind things about our partnerships with you all, but I think part of what we enjoy in this is finding research labs and frankly, a lot of community-based organizations that do like creative STEM learning for kids after school or things like that, where they have kind of a resident, kids want to be there, kids and families trust the people who lead them and engage them in interesting ways and productive ways. And the ability to maybe bring in researchers who may be faculty or graduate students and people who can kind of combine this unique set of things under one roof that actually gets you to the place you want to go. Like the kids have to want to be there.
Yeah, and just one more thought on that. As a developer, it's important to think about like how you enter that space and what you're giving back to it. You can't just walk in, you know, use the kids for your testing and then leave. You know, obviously you want to design something that's fun to do, make it meaningful, provide incentives like financial to somebody who's setting it up for you, and then go back and show them what you did and make them part of the process. I used to do this in research where we would like observe in classrooms and do all this stuff, and then they'd be like, can you just please send us your report at the end? Like, we just want to know, and then it would sit on a shelf. Like, that's not what the point of this is. I have regrets. But you go back and you show them what you did, and you keep iterating with them, and they can see the value in it too. So it's really important that you're thinking about how you're entering these spaces.
So you've all spent some money on this. Like you've made decisions out of the budgets you had to engage in this process, which is amazing. What's the guidance then for folks, if there are any folks in the room who are investors, philanthropists, et cetera, like they're thinking about what they want to see in their portfolio, or they have the opportunity to encourage spending in a particular direction? Like what's your guidance for them?
I'm happy to start. I mean, I think there's one, sort of what Michele mentioned in terms of requiring co-design as part of grant applications and proposals. I think there's also opportunities to involve young people in grant-making decisions. Through one group that we're a part of, the Funders for Adolescent Science Translation, they're in the process of launching a grant-making, a pot of funds that is a follow-on to the White House's Youth Policy Summit. But essentially, they'll be working with an organization to do a participatory grant-making program led by young people. And so it is definitely not possible to involve young people in this sort of financial decision-making. The only flag that I'd raise is that, you know, philanthropies have not historically been welcoming places for marginalized folks. And so if you want to do this, you can't kind of do it on a whim. You do want to do the work to make sure that you're prepared to welcome young people authentically and not tokenize them when you're bringing them into the process.
Thanks for that, yeah. Anyone else want to jump in on that question? Doesn't seem like a very popular question.
No, I have to share some. I mean, I think it's, I do think just looking for, when you're funding product development, ensuring that you know how you're getting insight from the student population you are serving. And you understand and see as a part of the process where students have some input and say and voice in what's happening. And there's, again, lots of ways to go about that. and partnerships can be very helpful, but making sure that it's done well and that that's just a natural part, I think, is likely to lead to much more effective product build.
No, I'll say this. I think we, as a funder, you will have a better chance at building something that kids want to use if kids are informing it from the beginning. And that's always a risk. That's the nature of funding projects like ours, right? And so I just think like it's just a better gamble from a design perspective.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and back to your point, Jared, the authentic engagement. I think I go back to we've found a lot of success in partnering with people who already convene kids in ways where they're comfortable, they feel welcome, they want to be there, and not always where they want to be. Like sometimes when we work in schools, school is school, but at least this is a kind of a new kind of learning opportunity, and it can be exciting if you formulate it well. Did you have more to say, Brandon? I thought you made a move yeah. So, all right, so we have a few minutes left. What's next for you? What are you thinking about? What's the future for you in this world of co-design and ASU+GSV?
AI. No, I'm just kidding.
Right. This whole session was really just an AI session.
Yes.
Did anybody say AI yet? I don't think so.
This is the only session where no one said AI.
I didn't have my AI clicker available. Yeah.
I mean, for us, it's the work. So this is what is next for us. We'll continue building products where we're centering kids' voices in the design process, impacting the adults who are building those products by understanding the user experience, but also how it connects to the pedagogy. And so, yeah, I think this is how we're moving forward. We're moving forward and work together. And then I think there is this other important piece, is most products, including ours, will continue to need to be refined. And so how, we haven't talked about this today, but how do young people play a role in that process? And again, deeper than just user feedback, survey question, and some play testing. Again, really important data, but it has to be part of a much bigger data set. How do we also create whatever is next, whatever's V2 or V3 with young people, and that's where we are as well.
Yeah, and the kids are the ones who will have the best insights about what that should be, right? Yeah, exactly. Michele.
Mine's a little bit left field, but I'm really excited about public-private partnerships. So there's a lot of sort of national philanthropies that are partnering with federal government, with NSF, with IES to create sort of funding structures and challenges, and thinking a lot about co-design as part of those. And so that's really exciting to me that there's momentum sort of at the federal level and thought partnership and infrastructure and resources from the federal government to do these kind of things.
Yeah, I would just say sort of similar. It is a part of the work. It's what we do. It's how we do our work. And we do it from early stages of research and sort of a lot funding researchers who think about their work in this particular way, all the way into product building. And so it's just a core part. And we're about to take on middle school readers who are just such a special, I was a middle school teacher. So, I just think middle schoolers are the most perfect beings on the planet. And they're hard. And so, I think we're about to do a lot of this as we get ready to build tools for middle schoolers who are just so uniquely opinionated and thoughtful and scared and nervous and all of the things.
Yeah. It's really a middle school play, all of this, right? Giving kids the moment to lean into their ideas and be heard. I'm with you. Jared.
Yeah, I think for us, one of the lessons that we've learned is that we really try to make it really hard for our product teams to say no to participating in co-design experiences. And so while we do that internally, I think also we're thinking about that externally. And so recognizing that there's a lot of infrastructure that's missing across the country for folks to be able to participate and access co-design experiences, or even just more broadly inclusive R&D experiences. And so thinking lots about what is infrastructure that's required to do co-design, not just with young people, but also with educators, because, and again, at any phase of product development, it could be valuable.
Thank you. So we have 44 seconds left. According to this timer, could we advance to the last slide? We made a little webpage with links to all of these organizations if they're new to you and you want to follow them and continue talking, or talk to us right here, right now. Thank you all so much for this dialogue. I'm really excited about all the work you're doing and I hope we continue to partner. Thanks. Thank you all.